Before starting Turkey's climate policy, let me share a few slides about Istanbul Policy Center. Istanbul Policy Center is a research institution of Sabancı University, which is one of the universities in Istanbul, that specializes in key social and political issues, and not limited to climate change. International relations and other issues are among our topics, but climate change has been one of the key topics of Istanbul Policy Center since 2012, actually, in the last 12 years. And in the climate change cluster, which is a research cluster at IPC, we are acting as an academic hub on climate change studies because IPC is more or less the only multidisciplinary climate policy center, and also acting as a think tank, actually, in Turkey. And we try to promote the idea of democratic deliberative policy making, and we try to conduct many interdisciplinary research, and we publish several policy studies. Among our research teams, climate policies in Turkey is our priority, but we are also very much interested in international climate politics, international negotiations, energy transition, climate justice, adaptation, climate change communication, and network building, in terms of network building of NGOs and academics in Turkey, mainly, but we also do collaborations with several international organizations. We will try to present some of them later. One of our key programs is Maror IPC Fellowship program, which was started with our collaboration with Stiftung Mercator in Germany. So we accept 6 fellows every year, including the fellows about climate change. So far, since 2012, we had more than 30 fellows working on climate change on different topics. And climate policy building project is kind of a key job we do at IPC. We try to make different actors engage to Turkish climate policy development. We organize roundtables, we publish studies, etc. So, and also several conferences, talks, including it's a very good connection, actually, as you have Energy Cafe, so we have in the last 8 years, I guess, we have Climate Cafe talks. So Climate Cafe talks are in every 2 months, still going on. But other than this, we have several nature and climate talks, other conferences, symposiums, and several webinars and YouTube events, YouTube talks, etc. We organize. We're still organizing. We are part of one climate think tank, an NGO network, which is called Climate Transparency of G20 countries, and we are regularly attending COPs since 2013. These are some of the projects we already completed, and we have 5 projects ongoing at the moment. So Eda will give you more ideas about these projects later. And these are some numbers in the last 12 years about our projects, fellows, events, and publications. And these are some of our partners we already collaborated in this past years. Okay, so after this introduction about IPC, I'd like to give you a little sense about Turkey's climate policy, which is, as I said in the beginning, probably a little bit unique, because first of all, Turkey is, especially in the international negotiations, it's a unique country because Turkey is an Annex 1 country under UNFCCC. Actually, it's a developing country. It's according to the IMF, it's a upper middle income, not high income, upper middle income country with a mixed market emerging economy. As you see, GDP per capita, but because of the historical reasons, actually, and because of the political reasons, mainly during the time UNFCCC established in 1992, as a NATO country, as an OECD country, Turkey became part of Annex 1 list, but not Annex 2 anymore. In the beginning, it was like that, but then Turkey was removed from Annex 2. But all in all, at the end, Turkey is a developed country in the international climate regime. That's an interesting part. It can lead many discussions. That's why I put a stress on that. And if you look at a little bit of the timeline of Turkey's climate policy, in the international policy, you will see that we are quite a latecomer in the international politics, although Turkey has been participating to all the talks, all the negotiations since 1989. Still, Turkey could ratify the UNFCCC only in 2004, 12 years delay here. Again, Kyoto Protocol, another 12 years delay, all because of Turkey's reluctance to become an Annex 1 country, because before Paris Agreement, it meant a top-down emissions reduction commitment. So because of this reason, Turkey really was reluctant. But then after Paris Agreement, again, after 6 years delay, Paris Agreement was ratified by Turkish Parliament in 2021, just before Glasgow COP. And at the same time, Turkey announced its 2053 net zero emissions reduction pledge. And at the same time, Minister of Environment and Urbanization was replaced with Minister of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change. So this was quite a positive development 3 years ago. And after that, Turkey updated its NDC, which was submitted just before Paris. Then in 2022, it was updated. So I will tell you about the NDC, but before that, I have to stress that although we have a net zero target, quite good net zero target, because 2050s, early 2050s, we have targets about increasing renewables, and EU Green Deal is important, so we can talk about that if you want in the Q&A. CBAM is seen as a threat. That's why ETS is on the way. So we will talk about all these. So climate governance, climate diplomacy are becoming much more important. But on the other hand, even in the updated NDC, Turkey does not have any real emissions reduction target. And Turkey's peak year is only 2038. So for an Annex 1 developed, at least in the regime, developed country, this kind of a very late peak year is really stopping us for developing our policies. And of course, without a real emissions target, I will show you the graph about that. So I will tell in a minute what is a real emissions and not unreal emissions reduction target. So because of this reason, actually, we don't have any coal phase-out target. No new EV target, no carbon tax, no ETS system. ETS system is on the way, it looks like, but we are not really sure. On the other hand, not only becoming an Annex 1 country, also emissions-wise, Turkey is not very small or very irrelevant, let's say, in terms of climate change, because among 197 countries, in the CO2 emissions, annual CO2 emissions, Turkey is 13th. It was 13 in 2021. And if it goes like this, because emissions are going quite fast, we will be probably among top 10 emitters after 2030. Our per capita emissions in 2030. Now it's quite close to the EU average, so it's probably going to be higher than EU average after 2030 if it goes like this. So this is the NDC graph. As you see, Turkey's emissions are increasing quite fast, but the emissions reduction target is according to business as usual. And if you look at the blue line, it's the business as usual, which is unrealistically high. It envisages a kind of a very high increase until 2030, which is impossible in any economy. So from that kind of imaginary reference scenario, Turkish government announced 41% emissions reduction in 2030, which means 32% increase according to 2020 numbers. So that's why actually we say that this is not an emissions reduction number, not even an emissions limitation. So it's kind of a real, NDC is showing us kind of a real business as usual in this line. So that's why Turkey really has very insufficient. So according to climate action track, Turkey's climate policies are critically insufficient. And this is the emissions increase, as you see, 6.6 tons per capita today, but probably it will go higher than 7 tons after 2030. And most of the emissions are coming from energy sector, this blue part actually, but also we have a substantial emissions from industry, especially industrial process emissions are quite high and increasing. Why emissions are increasing so fast? If you look at the right side on the graph, Turkey's electricity production still quite dependent on coal. So the brown part is 36% coal. This was the end of 2023, and 20%, 21% in natural gas. So together, it's more than 50%, 55% of the production is coming from fossil fuels, and 45% is coming from renewables, including hydro. Hydro is quite high, as you see, 20% production is coming from hydro. So, and if you look at the left-hand side, that the coal emissions are still going up, percentage-wise also is going up very fast. And that's why actually Turkey is still, although, as you know, finance is not easy anymore, but Turkey is still planning to install new coal power plants in the future, according to the National Energy Plan. But of course, Turkey is also planning quite high number of new renewable capacity. These targets are not bad, actually. It's quite high, but there is a still big gap between the existing fleet, which is the light blue here, and the targets. And unfortunately, wind and solar deployment is not as fast as it is necessary. Okay, so this was my short introduction to Turkish climate policy and a little taste about Turkey's energy policy. So maybe you can ask about it later. Now I stop my share, and Eda will continue with policies and about our projects. Thank you.
I'll talk a little bit about the governance and side of or governance restraints associated with the governance of Turkey's dilemmatic climate policy, and also introduce a little bit more of how IPC's work is situated among this contradiction to actually to maybe spark some more conversation between two centers and their communities, hopefully. So to begin with, mentioning climate law is important because it's in the making actually. So it's under construction and its text has been leaked into the media. So it's which means that it's not actually under construction with a lot of participation, which raises a lot of questions into the relevance of climate law. So who is it for, and what it is going to do for what kind of communities is an important question for the climate law at the moment. And as Umit has actually repeatedly mentioned, and which we are trying to also raise more awareness around, is that Turkey's climate law, as well as the policy itself, does not have concrete targets, both for mitigation and adaptation policies in a holistic way. So that's why it's important to carry out like studies and works on these scenarios as to how to actually maybe be able to carry out a process of participation in terms of like raising conversation around possible targets. And climate law actually does lack these targets as well. And it's mostly actually focusing on the ETS and the CBAM as an emergent issue. Again, bringing us back to the relevance issues. When it comes to the finance and the governance part of the equation, and so far we have been mostly talking about the national scale. In Turkey, most of the local governments and actors are mostly left with addressing local and regional mitigation and adaptation needs, which means that municipalities and their stakeholders and also civil society actors become very important in engaging certain debates about mitigation and adaptation. Which also consequently is bringing up municipal debt. We can talk about this a little bit further in the Q&A, but municipalities are also, especially local governments in general, are trying to raise financial instruments to actually continue building more resilient infrastructure. And which also raises some sort of debt for mitigation and adaptation practices. And it's also worth mentioning that Turkey is located in the Mediterranean basin, which is a hotspot for climate adaptation issues. So the adaptation side and the debt side, and how to finance these like more resilient infrastructures, both in the cities but also in the rural areas, is a very important topic in terms of the climate policy in Turkey, which is not really addressed at the moment by the existing plans for adaptation, to be more specific. And also, lastly, inequalities and the question of social justice and economic justice is very much lacking, especially on the scales of planning, when we consider infrastructure, but also, when you think about all these like mitigation and adaptation risks for Turkey's ongoing risks. And this is from, the 68 billion over. So according to the World Bank's estimations that was done for Turkey, so Turkey actually needs 68 billion over the course of 2022 to 2030, and this was actually measured in 2022. In order to carry out the necessary mitigation practices at national scale to be able to actually, counter these risks. So this is what really local governments and also some part at the national scale, the financial side of the equation is what it is. So considering all of these major aspects of climate change in Turkey, IPC has priorities, 4 main priorities to be more precise. Leading the climate policy, especially through certain stakeholder engagement and mostly through local creating stakeholder processes that would bind local action to global governance, and also vice versa, to bring in best practices and global governance examples to the local action epistemologies is an important part of what IPC has been doing through its projects and also through fellowships. Advancing the energy transition and practically, I think, driving the just transition also complements that priority. Turkey is, obviously is going through an energy transition much like any other country in the world. And in order to advance in these energy transitions, actually building more realistic scenarios and also try to come up with like more realistic and also ambitious targets that complements those scenarios becomes an important part of what IPC has been doing over the last 10 years, basically. And also, as another stream, as I have started mentioning, strengthening the climate adaptation is very, very important, since Turkey is a very disaster-prone country, not only in terms of earthquakes, but also climate emergency disasters has been in floods and also sea level rises that threatens coastal areas, and also droughts that majorly impact agricultural production. All these things come together as almost like a polycrisis over the past 4 or 5 years, and became even more obvious. So we also have research and works on strengthening climate adaptation. Yep. When we think about, especially thinking about the, building alternative scenarios, and not necessarily alternative scenarios, but building really realistic scenarios is part of the most important projects carried out by IPC. So I guess mentioning raising ambition project is very, very relevant here. We're actually doing this project with Tufts University, where we carry out a policy gap analysis. And through expert elucidations, we're trying to build an energy policy scenario through an energy policy simulator, which you see just like on the right here. Which will be open to everyone. And it's actually a comparative practice among, I think, 9 countries, including big emitters like Brazil, China, or India. And here, after the policy gap analysis, what we're hoping to do is to actually see what kind of policy combinations have effect on employment, emissions, or debt, internal debt, stuff like that, so that by this it would be easier to actually develop and discuss about possible scenarios. Not only actually with the government itself, but also among the stakeholders that we engage with. We can use this like energy policy simulator. We will be able to do that, at least. This is an ongoing project. As part of the project, we did some of policy gap analysis, where we actually put out, I'm not going to go over all of this, I just wanted to show you what we have done so far within that project, which actually complements, strengthening the energy transitions and scenario building in Turkey. What we have done so far is to actually create an inventory of policy tools to understand understand how, where does the policy gap and the implementation gaps lie within, across the climate policy and energy policy, to be more precise, of Turkey. And so far, I mean, what we have found is not really different than what Umit has been actually mentioning, but mostly ineffective voluntary fiscal policy for emissions reductions. And we mostly have regulatory frameworks rather than incentives, fits, to actually support the energy transition, which brings up the question of path dependency and mostly all these like legal and financial instruments that are tied into the path dependency stream. There is also limited scope of adaptation without targets for sectors and addressing vulnerabilities due to climate variability. There are standards for reporting GHG emissions without effective taxation and incentive mechanisms to promote EVs. And because the currency EVs are still very expensive, and also there is a lot of, I think, problem in terms of the infrastructure as well. And most of the standard setting and guidelines and certifications that has been put up for certain sectors like housing, green buildings, and industrial emissions do lack certain targets or caps in that sense, and which automatically actually brings the absence of fits and incentives to actually encourage and enhance those targets. Another project that we have carried out to actually build scenarios was the Decarbonization Pathways for Turkey project. Here, we looked at how Turkey can actually build a net zero roadmap over the years and see what would be the cost benefit analysis and the timing and the geographical distribution, and also the progress and development of the energy transition in a geographical sense. Of course, this does not necessarily include the land tenure or all these discussions about land, but still, as scenario building, we were able to actually show that a net zero roadmap was possible for Turkey as a concrete scenario, if it was followed up with targets and everything. So the Decarbonization Pathways for Turkey as a project has provided possible targets, if the government were to be ambitious and also was willing to, determine these targets. And then we had the CoBenefits project, where we have actually studied how energy transition for net zero would shape the employment, industry development, health, energy security, and industrial competitiveness. And again, with partners from India, South Africa, Vietnam, it was more of like a comparative and a relational project. We have also founded, IPC has founded Shura, which is important to mention here. Shura is an energy transition center, and they periodically publish policy papers on energy transition, its economics, the technology, modeling of that infrastructure. So all these like more technical, I might say, in that sense, papers are mostly published by Shura, and IPC actually very frequently collaborates with Shura in carrying out these assessments and also shaping interrelational agenda together on climate and energy policy. So these are like selected reports from mostly based on our priorities. We have been interested in the economy side of the energy transition, especially in terms of how, for example, the CBAM would take shape in the Turkish economy and what would happen. And also we have looked at the Turkish emissions trading systems, particularly through IPC fellowships. And then we also have important work on, I would say, resilience and adaptation strategies as well. Mostly, maybe these are selected as well, but these are also about how to build resilient food systems and agricultural transformation to see how Turkey can actually develop more target-oriented adaptation work. So these are, again, these are part of what we have done so far, especially low carbon development pathways, also decarbonization pathway. And you see like all these reports are actually accessible through our website. So like if you're interested, you can take a look at our website. So we have also been trying to build some new relationships and new project proposals. These are in the making, in the cooking phase, mostly. So we have applied for a climate adaptation policy gap analysis project with Sabancı University. This will help us actually map out what's been done, because adaptation practices in Turkey is very fragmented, carried out by local and national scales, but also there are sites where these multilateral financial institutions comes into the picture as well. So that's one thing that we're trying to establish as a stream. So we have applied for a project with Sabancı University. We also applied for, just did that maybe last week with the Energy Ethics Center at St. Andrews University on just transition and labor. That is something that we have been actually working on in the past year, as coal is an important part of the energy transition debate in Turkey, and just transition is part of that transition. And in the Decarbonization Pathways report, we actually had the opportunity to illustrate, a possible phase out or a not a phase out, but a possible retirement scenario there. So just transition is both part of the agenda, the governmental discussions, but also an important part of the energy transition, and also in terms of the health benefits and economic and social benefits of the climate policy question. We also have, this is very much in the making, but we also would like to be able to, talk about issues around digitalization and climate policy tools. And then we also would be interested in projects like climate communication and diplomacy. These are only the ideas that we have been interested in so far, but we're also open to other ideas that you would like to discuss in terms of the Turkish climate policy, or possible other venues to cooperate.